So good. Yeah, good to see you. Good to see all this smiling, relaxed face. It's such an honor for me to offer my talk after meditation because we're in such a space of deep connection and relaxation and perfect situation for reflection. So as Bobby said, my intention is to talk about third and fourth mindfulness training, but I also wanted to touch on the idea of ethics itself, coming from a space of somebody who explored different identities of identifying myself as secular, identifying myself as spiritual but not religious. So I wanted to, and I know that that aspect of myself has resonated with many of our community members. So I titled tonight's talk as Freethinker's Guide to Ethics, Empower and Clarify with Mindfulness Training. So there'll be some discussions of ethics before we get into it. So for those of you who are new, welcome to the Dallas Meditation Center. Dallas Meditation Center's core gathering formats are inspired by Plum Village tradition, and Thich Nhat Hanh is the founder of Plum Village tradition. And Brother Chising is the founder of the Dallas Meditation Center, and his vision was to bring mindfulness and meditation practice to people of all faith and non-faith, secular, backgrounds in an earth-based way with an emphasis on creativity, music, and the arts. And this is how I fell in love with Dallas Meditation Center as an attendee, and I'm honored to be serving as the center director now. A few attendees and volunteers told me that I didn't know you were center director. So I made this fancy slide with a nice photo that our Tuesday gathering attendee has a professional photographer, and he offered photography as a service. And so this is me, and I'm serving as a center director since 2022. I was a creative writing instructor since 2010, yoga teacher, mindfulness teacher in scientific context, studying under Dr. Kate Colbert, who was Dr. John Kabat-Zinn's student. And I'm also a student of somatic experiencing therapy. And I like to add disclaimer that I did not study Buddhist philosophy under the guidance of mentor or with institutional support or formalized training context, such as theology and so on. I learned by self-study and conversations with our community members. So please consider me as an informed enthusiast, and think of this talk as a conversation and reflection practice. I know many of you are deeply informed, and even if you're not informed, I believe that we all have Buddha nature in us, and there's a wisdom in us. So thank you in advance for your understanding with my limited knowledge and scope. And feel free to offer your insight. I believe in collective wisdom, and if it is your practice tonight, sharing deepens our collective awareness, and that's the beauty of this space. Thank you for being here. And I just wanted to highlight the creative writing instructor part, because tonight I'm really asking you to bring in introspection. When you think about the dialogue about ethics, it might be easy to think about guidelines in this kind of established way. But tonight, what I find really important as part of the process is asking ourselves, what comes up for you? What resonates with you? What does this mean for you? And that was my jam as a creative writing teacher, because there's information that you're pulling up by introspective, really gazing inwards and asking yourself those questions, especially when the question has to do with how to live an ethical life, how to live an authentic life. And I like to add too, for those of you who are new, that primary intention for my talks is to create a space for us to reflect, share, and connect. It's not just like information, barrage of information. So Some might ask after deep meditation, why are we chatting? Why are we talking? So I like to say this out loud. Mindful conversation in this deepened state as a new level of awareness, and collective reflection opens our eyes to see more possibilities beyond our current mode of operation. And it also helps us realize some of our perception might be a little askew and a little limited, but together we're complementing each other and we are learning about the world together. So that's why I invite you to this collective reflection practice. And where our attention goes, our energy follows. So I'm really grateful that you're here tonight, because how many people can say that I spend my Sunday thinking about what ethical life should be like, like spending time with this would enrich your life. And even if the topic can be challenging or confusing or otherwise. So thank you for being here. Additional intention for this talk, as Bobby mentioned, on July 28th, there'll be 5 mindfulness training transmission ceremony. That's the last Sunday, and it will be about 6 to 7:30 p.m. If this talk resonates with you, please consider becoming an aspirant or becoming a volunteer for the ceremony. So that's additional intentionality point 2. So I like titling my talks long, but usually there's an intention in each word, I promise. And free thinkers. The reason I mentioned free thinkers in the title and what it means to be a free thinker, reflecting on what ethical life looks like, is that Dallas Meditation Center community members that I've met often seem to have that quality of free thinking. And I believe that has to do with our 3 values of generosity, creativity, and inclusivity. You're seeing pride flag here, and you're seeing interfaith flag over the door. So we're all about inclusivity. Come as you are, make your practice yours. And as you heard Bobby say, we repeatedly say, our facilitators like to remind us, feel free to only participate in the practices that resonate with you. Don't do what you don't feel like doing, because we aim to keep this space spacious for who you are and what you might be bringing into this room. And this inclusivity mission seems to foster free thinking. And yeah, there's a intentional chosen participation to the collective practice. And there's this invitation to build your individual practice that is right for you. And I'd like to say mindfulness practice improves our sense of connection to our body. And that can also improve our critical thinking skills, because our body often informs us what our cognitive mind doesn't register. And to be in tune with our body means we are aware of the layers of our individual perception and experience and its interaction with a complex world. So it's hard not to be inclusive, aware of the diversity of experience if you practice mindfulness. And with this awareness, we can cultivate respect and compassion for one another and for oneself. So that critical thinking equips us to question whenever a set of rules is presented before us. Is this set of rules serving the people here and now? Or are we caught up in habit energy? Or are we going through the motion mindlessly when we choose these rules? And I feel so fortunate that I've had a good conversation with free thinkers of our communities. And when you look at the definition of free thinker, it's often in singular, such as a person who thinks freely or independently, one who forms opinion on the basis of reason independently of authority, one who rejects or is skeptical of religious dogma. But free thinking doesn't have to be isolating. I've met so many of you who have this free thinking quality, and people share their departure from the previous. So I hope you can feel how enriching inclusive space of Taoist Meditation Center can be, and how free thinking allows you to choose the guideline of ethics and wholesome life for yourself. Yeah. So next word to highlight, ethics. What comes to your mind when you hear the word ethics? And I'll hold the space for about 10 deep breaths as I ask you these questions. How do you define ethics? How does it feel if you're to think about questions like, to me, ethical life looks like, my parents' definition of ethical life seems to be, to whoever name that comes to your mind, to Barbara, ethical life means, or to my previous community, ethical life meant. Let's take deep breaths. Feel free to choose any one question that you're landing on. And just tune in with your sensations, your thoughts. Thank you for reflecting. Due to time, we won't be sharing, but for myself, the question of my parents' definition of ethical life seems to be kind of gives me a little tightening. And some of the kind of, what does it mean for me to define ethical life? There's a little bit of a kind of lack of clarity to if I were to just think from the top of my head. So here's the definition of ethics from Merriam-Webster dictionary. And the reason I'm bringing these up, I'll clarify later. There are definitions such as a set of moral principles, the principles of conducts governing an individual or a group, a set of moral issues of aspects such as rightness, and the discipline regarding what is good and bad, and with moral duty and obligation. So this definition of ethics kind of at least revealed to me why I feel slight discomfort when I were to just think about ethics out loud. Because the definition of ethics conflates public and private sphere. What I mean by that is that often we carry personal values, but in the code of conduct and value system, as written out, might seem like external values coming into your sphere to say, this is what you should value. And code of conduct is often included in ethics. So there is guideline what to do, which can also, depending on how you feel about somebody telling you what to do, might feel a little, you might feel different feelings. And there's often a definition of what is right and what is wrong. I mean, in Buddhist context, thankfully, it would be more like what's wholesome and not wholesome rather than strict binary of right and wrong. But this is a tricky territory, and this is why I wanted to start this talk this way. To respect everyone's private value system, and also to respect everyone's process on how one takes what action, to honor everyone's boundaries, we have to be careful when we talk about ethics. if not carefully explored, the word ethics can conjure the idea of set of strict rules and doctrines what is told to abide by. And that's not a good feeling, and especially in our community where I've heard anecdotes of having difficulties with top-down institutions. And this mode of ethics can feel restrictive, outdated, and at worst, and I'm not exaggerating, can exacerbate the power imbalances in this world, serving as a boundary-breaching device of behavior control if we are not encouraged to examine thoroughly and how we feel about it. Here, this is an excerpt from my talk in April. There's just a book titled, sorry, I'm feeling a little self-conscious, especially in front of the family visiting, titled Unfuck Your Boundaries. And this book talks about spiritual boundaries as something to reflect on. What is our belief system? How do we choose to practice them? And what do we choose to share about those beliefs and practices? That book talks about many people being wounded from top-down institutions that does not invite reflections and our inner yes. The screen is, oh, there it is. So let's see. I don't think we have time for this, but I would just mention this practice as something to think about. Just so that we can kind of think about how ethics can be a tricky topic. Imagine talking to someone about what you believe to be a right thing to do regarding potentially touchy topic where there's a lot of disagreements. I'm trying to think of something that is not as touchy. Is it a right thing to do to bring a puppy that you found on the street to kill shelter? And imagining someone that you are close to and agree with, having that conversation, imagining having that conversation with someone close, but not necessarily you might agree with. And having conversations about what is right and wrong with someone who's just an acquaintance or someone that you might be not considering a friend as of now. It's tricky. I hope you all agree that it's a tricky thing to talk about ethics. Because ethical codes are also connected to religion and culture of origin. And I've gotten a lot of ethical advice when I was in Korea, but I noticed that there's more carefulness or avoidance in American context. And I speculate that the United States and Dallas, being such a melting pot of different culture and religion, perhaps talking about ethics can feel more tricky because we have to navigate multi-layered nature of ethics that involves culture, that involves religion, upbringing. But I'd like to think that this is actually a great possibility where people can mindfully engage conversations about ethics in a way that is interfaith, in a way that with the awareness of multiculturalness. I think this is a perfect spot to talk about ethics. And this is from my talk about interfaithness. There was a really good TED talk by Rabbi Ted Buchan, Pastor Don McKinsey, and Imam Jamal Rahman, where they talked about how disrespect is what causes the disconnect amongst the different religions. Every authentic spiritual path is an avenue to a shared universal, but that universal is far greater than the particular path. The screen is catching up. Oh. in, breathing out. And you're back. So the screen is in the page that I didn't intend to, but while that's on, let me talk about, that page. That is that because ethics is a sticky thing to talk about, sometimes we want to avoid talking about ethics. But the conventional wisdom of don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics, don't talk about whatever it may be, that or they tend to lead to us missing the opportunity to learn deeper layer reality. And ethics is a great space to collectively reflect on, so we can unite our mindful friends coming from different spaces for united mission of building a life that is compassionate and inclusive. So let's see if I can get that to real quick. I'm going to skip the projecting on the screen because it seems like that's where the problem is repeating. You're missing out so many visuals. Yeah, because when we are missing ethics as part of our collective awareness, there's a danger to that. And what's at stake is that, there's a lot of power imbalances in this world. And we can acquiesce into the state of the world as is if ethics is not part of the conversation. What would be the right thing to do? And one of the phrases that is my pet peeve is the dog eat dog world out there. It's like, no, don't stop there. We got to reflect on how we can take the wholesome action, right action, so we can make this world a more compassionate place. So revisiting the title, I wanted to have the word empower as part of the conversation, because part of what I really appreciate about Five Mindfulness training is that by inviting our gut feelings, by inviting our reflection practice as an individual who are working on aligning life in an ethical way, but there's a lot of work to be done. There's a way that by mindfulness training invites one to be authentic, and be honest and bring your whole self as you are. To me, that's empowered way of thinking about ethics instead of desperately kind of trying to hide the part of myself that I'm not proud of, the part that I'm still working on. And also, where I'm allowed to say, I feel torn about this part of the ethical guideline. Can we have a conversation about that? And Taoist Meditation Center in Plum Village context has been really welcoming towards that. And that welcoming of dissent, discomfort, disagreement is shown from Plum Village leadership. The third mindfulness training, that True Love, in 2022, there was a revision of how it's written. And it's a big deal to be revising the 5 precepts originated value system that is so central to defining the tradition of Buddhism as Plum Village is defining. And this changes were initiated to be more inclusive of LGBTQIA+ community. They made some changes, such as instead of defining the true love as something that is known to family and friends and accepted, it added the sentence, I resolve to find spiritual support for the integrity and my relationship from family member, friends, and Sangha community with whom there is support and trust. So that makes that phrase more inclusive in that you don't have to be supported by your family member of origin to really feel like you're pursuing true love. And there's this passage update on this. I believe that this was made in a way that to be more inclusive of transgendered practitioners too. They replaced the passage, seeing that body and mind are one. They changed it to, seeing that body and mind are interrelated. And they added the passage at the end. Recognizing the diversity of human experience, I'm committed not to discriminate against any form of gender identity or sexual orientation. So, ethical guideline in this framework is updating to reflect the discomfort, reflect some of the feedbacks from the community members. And these changes are official. So my long title, Freethinker's Guide to Ethics, Empower and Clarify. Clarify is the next word. When you're allowed to bring your whole self and be your individual self, feeling empowered that you can voice what comes to you without judgment. Another questions that you might want to ask is, do I really know what I believe in? Do I really know what is right or wrong? And in discussing what is the right / wholesome thing to do, how do we know we are not repeating what we heard from our trusted ones, our in-group? How do we know what we believe in? It's actually not that easy of a process. And this is where the call for investing time to reflect comes in. And the reason I appreciate 5 mindfulness training is that it asks you to keep making time to reflect communally. A little greedy, thinking that, yeah, this image I wanted to show. And collective reflection practice as part of reflecting on ethics is not limited to Buddhist tradition. And I wanted to bring that image of the School of Athens into this talk, because Socrates, who's on the upper left side of this painting, he speaks of a similar quote. And in an interfaith space and secular friendly space, I like to bring in quotes that even non-Buddhists can relate to. This is a famous quote, actually. Socrates, or in Plato's Apology, there's a quote dedicated to Socrates that goes something like this. I say that it is greatest good for a man to discuss virtue every day, and those other things about which you hear me conversing and testing myself and others, for the unexamined life is not worth living. There's a lot packed in there. So let me unpack a little bit. So even Socrates urges us to make time to practice talking about virtue, what ethic means to you, and conversing and testing myself and others. The intention behind the reflection practice is so that you can keep nudging at yourself to examine yourself and others in your life. And that is ethical life, making time to examine how you're living and how you want to build a wholesome life where you're supporting one another and also being authentic to yourself. And the famous part, the unexamined life is not worth living. It is a famous line, but I like to, the negative sentences doesn't land with me too well. So rewriting it, examined life is a meaningful life. To paraphrase Socrates, we need both individual practice of reflection, collective practice of reflection and conversation to keep learning about oneself and one another, recalibrate and refine our inner compass, to live a well-informed ethical life, to live a life that is meaningful. So meaningful life in this context is when you fill your life with chosen values that you reflected on, you invested in. That's how you feel like the values are meaningful to you. The quote I like to share from The Little Prince is that it's the time you spent on your rose that makes your rose so important. So I hope you'll consider making time to reflect and spend time with ethical values so that that becomes part of your building blocks to enrich your life and make your life more meaningful. And mindfulness training transmission ceremony is a special space for that, to choose the values and to be part of a ceremony where you are seen by mindful friends. So there's a good kind of compilation of private and public here. It's a really meaningful experience. So just wanted to mention that. Oh, yeah. And here's the rebellious freethinker part of me that comes in. And I feel like this poem offers a useful metaphor, and I hope it resonates with you too. Because to me, this ethical reflection practice of reading the Find Mindfulness training, talking about it to friends, is a structure that helps me to build a mindful life rather than it is in it all, like be it all type of structure that I'm just taking literally. So the scaffolding as a metaphor is very helpful. You need a good scaffolding to build a building, such as your life, mindful life. And Seamus Heaney's poem has actually to me, perfect poem called Scaffolding. Let me read it to you. Masons, when they start upon a building, are careful to test out the scaffolding. Make sure the planks won't slip at busy points. Secure all letters. Tighten bolted joints. And yet, all this comes down when the job is done, showing off walls of sure and solid stone. So if, my dear, there sometimes seems to be old bridges breaking between you and me, never fear. We may let the scaffolds fall, confident that we have built our wall. So we don't have to worry about ethical guidelines changing and updating. That doesn't mean there isn't a solid, perfect forever guideline. The guideline is within us, and it's something that we build as we reflect and notice what resonates with us and where the discomfort might be originating from. That investigative process helps us to build a mindful and meaningful life. So this is when I would like to invite anyone who's called to recite and reflect on third and fourth mindfulness training while being honest with yourself what comes up for you as you read or listen. So this is the first sentence of the third mindfulness training, true love. If anyone's called to read it out loud, feel free to start doing so.
Aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, I am committed to cultivating responsibility and learning ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, and society.
Next long sentence. Anyone willing to read and
Read it.
Thank you.
Knowing that sexual desire is not love, and that sexual activity motivated by craving always harms myself as well as others. I am determined not to engage in sexual relations without mutual consent, true love, and a deep long-term commitment.
I resolve to find spiritual support for the integrity of my relationship from family members, friends, and Sangha with whom there is support and trust.
I'll read this one. I will do everything in my power to protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct.
Seeing that body and mind are interrelated, I am committed to learn appropriate ways to take care of my sexual energy and to cultivate the 4 basic elements of true love: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and inclusiveness for the greater happiness of myself and others.
Anyone willing to read the final sentence? Yes, please.
Recognizing the diversity of human experience, I am committed not to discriminate against any form of gender identity or sexual orientation. Practicing true love, we know that we will continue beautifully into the future.
Thank you so much. Taking a few breaths to just let yourself think what comes to your mind, feel what comes up. And we'll proceed with the 4th mindfulness training. And people on the Zoom, feel free to jump into if you're called to.
Aware of the suffering caused by the unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I'm committed to cultivating loving speech and compassionate listening in order to relive suffering and to promote reconciliation and peace in myself and among other people, ethnic and religious groups, and nations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I'm committed to speaking truthfully, using words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. When anger is manifesting in me, I am determined not to speak.
Anyone?
Could read it.
Thank you.
I will practice mindful breathing and walking in order to recognize and to look deeply into my anger.
The next one.
I know that the roots of anger can be found in my wrong perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and in the other person.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll go.
Thank you.
I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations.
Thank you, Josh.
I determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain, and not to utter words that can cause division or discord.
To read this one. I'll go. I will practice right diligence to nourish my capacity for understanding, love, joy, and inclusiveness, and gradually transform anger, violence, and fear that lie deep in my consciousness. So, how many people do we have today? I would love to form small groups, if you will, to talk about some of these prompts. If they're useful, feel free to use those. If not, you can just talk about what came up for you. So during the talk and recitation, what came up for you? Which part resonated with you? Which part didn't resonate with you? Any vision or intention that came up during the recitation or talk? Now that we talked about ethics as a self-examining collective reflection practice, what does ethical life mean to you? So a small group of 3, I feel like that's always kind of nice. But know that sharing practice might not be yours today. I totally understand. In which case you can place your hand at heart or just avoid eye contact and just casually form a group of 3. See where this conversation can lead you. Yeah, and we'll have this conversation for next 10 minutes. Jake, if you don't mind making a breakout room for the Zoom folks, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Dana.